Hi, I'm Chris Wilson from Grinding Gear Games, and I'm with Jonathan Rogers, our technical director today. We'll be showing you some of Path of Exile Ascendancy. So this is the expansion we've been working on since the release of The Awakening earlier this year. The Awakening came out in July, and we're expecting to release Ascendancy in early 2016. So to tell you some about the expansion, the basic idea is that a few hundred years ago in Rayclast, an emperor called Nazario decided that he wanted to try a non-standard way of finding a successor to his throne rather than siring an heir. And so he built a set of trials throughout the world of Rayclast that people can compete in, and if someone's able to complete all 6 trials successfully, then they're able to gain access to a dangerous labyrinth called the Lord's Labyrinth. And of course, if someone's able to complete the labyrinth without dying, then they get to become the emperor. And so Ascendancy is the story of how you get to find these trials in the world and then complete them and hopefully gain access to the labyrinth for yourself. So at the moment, Jonathan's playing through one of the existing areas in the game and is looking for the first trial. So upon encountering it, you find a door like this to the Trial of Ascendancy. Now each of these 6 trials is special because they introduce a new type of trap, and as you can see here, we have these spinning blade traps. Now these types of traps are something we weren't able to do in Path of Exile before, to be honest, because our netcode just wasn't up to it. It was very difficult with client-server synchronization for us to run stuff like this where your position matters exactly. But now that we have that sorted out with the release of The Awakening earlier this year, we're able to do these complicated traps. And so each of the 6 trials has a puzzle that you have to solve, switching levers, flicking switches, and dodging the traps. This particular one is teaching you the mechanics of how spinning blades work, and it's a gentle introduction, one that can be lethal, but it means that later on when you encounter spinning blade traps in the labyrinth, you'll understand how the mechanics work so that you're able to get through some much more difficult puzzles. So upon completing a given one of these trials, you find this plaque. Tagging all 6 of them in the world gives you the ability to access the labyrinth. So now with this one complete, Jonathan's going to warp to a different area and show you a completely different type of trap. So this one here is inside the crematorium in Act 3, and it demonstrates the rising lava trap. So as you can see on the screen at the moment, there's lava and you'll die if you go down there. So Jonathan's going to wait until the lava subsides, then explore this area. Now the interesting thing to note about this place is that there are these fire skeletons, and they're immune to the lava effects. They come out of various monster spawners, and once the lava starts to rise again, you have to get off it very fast, so he needs to run to safety, otherwise he'll die in a couple of seconds. Now the puzzle behind this one, relatively simple because it's an introductory trial, is to find a way of stopping all of the skeletons from spawning and timing it with the lava. And we've placed them just far enough away so that by the time you deal with a spawner, you have only a few seconds to get back to safety before the inevitable incineration occurs. So throughout the world we have 6 of these introductory areas, and the goal is that by the time the player's completed all 6 of them, they understand the broad mechanics of how things are going to work in the labyrinth. Speaking of which, it's time to show you the actual labyrinth itself. It's entering the airlock of the labyrinth, named after that because it's a place where once you enter, you can't leave. It's kind of like a localized hardcore mode, basically. You get one shot at the labyrinth before you're ejected from it. So this area here used to be very fertile hundreds of years ago when it was grown, but now most of the irrigation has failed and it's covered in kind of dry, ruined plants. So upon entering, this has locked it in so that this is going to be a one-person run of the labyrinth. You can play with up to 6 people if you have a party, though of course as people die, they can't rejoin. So the labyrinth contains a new type of level generation for Path of Exile. Now this is already a game with a lot of random level generation. In the labyrinth, the overall meta layout changes every day. So each day, players encounter a completely different order of levels with different connections between them. So for example, there might be a secret passageway leading from level 1 to level 4, or maybe there's a different type of trap present that particular day in various different areas. And we've done a lot of interesting stuff with connecting up the areas, requiring keys and hidden switches and that kind of stuff, so that the playthrough of the labyrinth varies a lot from day to day. This also means that throughout the day, players are able to discuss what the day's layout is like and find better ways to solve it. Now today, for example, there's these 2 golden doors that lead to different areas, and both of them say that they need a golden key to open. So Jonathan's task now is to find where the golden key is, which is hopefully in a nearby side area, so that he can choose which of those forks to take. Now initially, he's not going to know which fork is better. You have to play through the labyrinth twice to find out. So we're expecting players, while trying to get the best speedrun of the day, to come up with kind of a group analysis of the best way through the labyrinth. But of course, players who discover secrets can keep those secrets to themselves if they want to, so that they can try to get a faster run than other people. And we'll be tracking these various runs on leaderboards, so we can basically see who's doing best on the labyrinth that day. So this area here actually has a rising lava device that's non-functional, partly because a lot of the labyrinth is in ruins. There are lots of broken traps all over the place. It's difficult to know which ones work and which ones don't, but it can be very deadly when they do work. So this sub-area of the labyrinth is very much like the prison, and it contains a variety of different traps. Here's the rising lava one again. This one's fully functional, I assure you. Jonathan? Oh, it's not fully functional? Yeah. Well, I'm absolutely sure there is fully functional lava somewhere in here. So one of the characteristics behind this area today is that there are tar zombies, and these are ones that can encumber your progress as you move through it. This is also home to a lot of different types of traps, including the spike traps, which is a type that we haven't demonstrated so far. So, great. So this is an interesting thing to talk about. Jonathan's noticed there's a switch there, and this is kind of hidden. It's certainly not mandatory that you notice it. So upon clicking the switch, you'll see that a wall opens up. And this is essentially a secret room. Inside here, there's a difficult fight, and there's also an object that's labeled as a mysterious dark shrine. Now, Path of Exile players will know exactly what this means, but for the uninitiated, it's something which is going to cause a powerful random effect. Subtly different from the way we did dark shrines elsewhere. This one adds an effect from a certain pool, and this particular one says feel the corruption in your veins. And now, when Jonathan loads up the map to see what mods now affect the area, you can see that monsters now poison him when they hit, but in return, the labyrinth now drops more items with higher rarity. So by encountering these different shrines, usually hidden behind secrets, you can increase the difficulty of the labyrinth and also increase its rewards. So Jonathan's running across the spikes here. They trigger behind him, and there are lots of different criteria for how spikes work. Some of them are on patterns, some of them wait until you get near them before they trigger. That's a close caller. Right, so at the end of this particular trap gauntlet, there's a chest that has a golden key inside it, which enables the first of today's puzzles to be solved. So this allows him to select from the two doors in the previous area. Now the labyrinth is generally made up of 3 broad sections. Each one has several of these puzzles, trap gauntlets, various side areas, secret rooms, and so on, before you get to fight a boss at the end of it. And the 3 areas select from many different tile sets. Now, while this tile set here is a variation of one that's used in the game at the moment, there are some tile sets that are completely new, internally known as the Elegant House and the Dry Garden and so on. They're ones that you'll get to see in the travels here. Now, it sometimes pays to make a map of the labyrinth. That was a side area. It's important to know where you're going because there is a lot of complexity, otherwise it wouldn't be a labyrinth, I guess. So the entity that you see on the right there is a blade sentry, a flying variation. There are 2 types of these that you'll find in the labyrinth. They generally follow fixed paths. This particular one can fly over chasms, and it's a very bad idea to get close to those. So armed with a golden key, Jonathan's able to go and pick which of the 2 doors he'd like to go to. So which will it be? The right-hand one with the monsters behind it? Alright. So these are going to lead to different areas, and of course because the layout changes every day, I have no idea what is behind each of these 2 areas. You'll notice some broken spike traps there, bent out of shape. Great, so this is a variation of the crypt, and it's the area immediately after that particular golden door. Of course, the other one would lead to a different area. This one has its own distinctive types of traps in it. Right, so the next mechanic we like to talk about, rather than doing a full labyrinth playthrough, is to demonstrate how the boss fights work. Now, you get to fight Emperor Azaro himself. And the interesting thing here is that you'll fight him multiple times throughout the labyrinth, but the effects of one battle will affect the other ones. So upon fighting him the first time, the fight is simpler than the other ones, there's less stuff going on, but the way that you deal with it dictates a lot how the other ones work.
It's one thing to take the throne, Ascendant. It's quite another to keep it.
So, Emperor Azaro has a spirit above him, which is the goddess that he was worshipping before he was entombed in this labyrinth, and the spirit will do area denial and basically cast things while he's got his own agenda. Now this particular variation of the fight has these 3 statues. As you can see, Jonathan's running around and tagging them. Now these 3 statues each embody different elements. So for example, there's a lightning one up there that he's tagging. there's a fire one up here and a cold one down there. And as the statue is active, Nazario gains additional power, able to hurt you with those elements. So tagging the statues disables them, and that's important to make the fight manageable, otherwise it's pretty deadly. So once you've tagged them, you want to run in and do some damage. And unfortunately, of course, the other statues will activate while you're doing so you have to carefully balance where he is in regard to them. The whole time he's summoning skeletons, and the goddess is trying to deny areas of the ground by throwing projectiles down. Now the mechanic here, there are many different things where the statues are just one of the many mechanics in a boss fight, but this is the one that was randomly picked today. At the end of the fight, whatever statues are still active are going to carry on to the next one permanently. So it's very important to stay on top of the statues, because if Jonathan gets Nazario down to critical health here while there are statues still alive, then he'll have to face those in the next fight, plus whatever mechanics there are. Now because there are 3 phases to this, you only have to get Nazario up to a certain amount of damage before he'll retreat. Approximately a third of his life. So here Nazario's leaving, and it's worth noting he's taking some of the statues with him. Yep, there are bugs, it's not finished yet. The elevator works perfectly on our testing version at home, I promise. So he's taken a statue with him out of the 3, and that's going to be present in the next fight. Now, so upon finishing that section, there's now another large portion of the labyrinth available. We won't spoil too much of that, but it's full of traps and gauntlets as well. Upon encountering Nazario the second time, in area B5, which is not something the players need to worry about, you'll notice that he has one of these statues permanently active. So that means he's getting lightning damage, and there's just nothing you can do about it, because Jonathan wasn't on top of dealing with that statue on the previous time. So the mechanic here is that there are various areas on the ground that he activates, and you want to stand within them in order to be able to damage him. This is a completely different way for the fight to operate compared to before. In addition, the fight is harder. Nazario gains more abilities. Now we have quite an interesting set of different mechanics that can spawn on the Nazario fight. Like the rest of the Labyrinth, is meant to be random each day, and we're trying very hard to keep that set full of different things so that players are always encountering new variations. And the goal here is that, on today's Labyrinth run you'll see some new type of trap you haven't necessarily seen the previous day, and so there's several weeks of dramatically different Labyrinth experiences for you to have. Now, as we'll discuss once the boss fight has been completed, there are some pretty awesome rewards that you get for completing the Labyrinth, and these rewards encourage you to not only play through the Labyrinth on each difficulty on your character to get valuable bonuses, but also to replay the Labyrinth as much as you can, because they allow you to change your items in an interesting way. And this is one of those systems that's set up so that experienced players will look at it and say, you know what, I'm going to play a bunch of the Labyrinth. When designing the characters for the demo here, we purposefully pitched them so that it's a relatively challenging fight with Nazario. Great. So he's retreating, and the fact that there are still some circles active, I believe, will power up the next fight. So this is now the third phase of the Labyrinth, which we'll skip over the traps in. As you can see, it's a completely different tile set. This is the Dry Garden one. This one is home to some interesting things. I believe that the spinning blades and trees. It's got the shooters, right? So yeah, there's a lot of dart shooters in the Dry Garden, which I believe we haven't shown yet. So this is the third phase of the Nazario fight. Now it's important that we have to show all 3 phases here, because otherwise you can't get the rewards, which is something we worked out. So as we continue with the development of the expansion, of course, we'll continue to add more variations of the fight. These are the few prototypes that we have working at the moment. Now you'll notice that the goddess on top is causing versions of her to appear on the ground in various places, and this creates area denial. So a mechanic here is that lieutenants get introduced throughout the fight. Nazario has 3 lieutenants that are immortalized in the Labyrinth with him, and they add to the fight, and it's very important for you to deal with these as they appear, because if you let all 3 out, Nazario is going to become extremely dangerous. Watch your life there. Yep, so he's out of flasks here, so he has to go and kill some skeletons to get flask charges back. So this is where it starts to get really difficult. Now normally in a regular playthrough, if Jonathan were to die here, that's his Labyrinth attempt for this go completely over. You have to start from the beginning at each time. In this particular version, and due to the fact that we expect to die in our demo, we've set it up so we can start again from the beginning of this fight if it happens, so thankfully it's not all over in that case. But it looks like he's handling it okay here. He's got one of the lieutenants down out of the 3 total. Now, depending on what's picked for a given day, the earlier mechanics that you've successfully or failed to bypass may affect lieutenants in different ways. In this particular case, Nazario's lightning damage means that it's very dangerous for him to hit you, but also extremely dangerous if there are lieutenants around distracting you during the process. Great, so upon killing Nazario, you get some item drops, and then you're able to move through to the Ascendancy Chamber where you get to see the rewards. Now this is the reason why people are completing the Labyrinth. There are basically two things here. So the first one is a system that we're adding in this expansion, and this is the big deal. So this is the concept of Ascendancy classes. Each of the character classes in Path of Exile can now specialize in one of three subclasses. So the duelist that Jonathan's playing can now become a Slayer, Gladiator, or Champion. And this is something we've never had in Path of Exile before. There were 7 classes and a massive skill tree, but now we have the ability to further specialize into one of 19 new subclasses, which enables you to have 26 distinct types of character in the game. And so these basically take your given class in 3 different archetypal directions. The Slayer is dramatically different from the Gladiator, which is dramatically different from the Champion. For example, the Champion has nodes like Inspirational, which mean that you and your allies have additional damage and movement speed. And this is great for duelists who want to run a bunch of auras, or want to specialize in things like Fortify here. This permanently gives you this buff that was previously a conditional thing that you could only get sometimes. So he's selecting the Gladiator, and this has a bunch of nodes that we can show you here. An example is, say, Gratuitous Violence. And this one here increases your chance of causing bleeding on enemies, which is something that's normally tricky to do, and then causes them to explode if they die while they're bleeding. So you can kind of chain a bunch of enemies dying together. So do you want to allocate the 2 points in Gratuitous Violence? Great. So you get 2 points for each time you complete the Labyrinth in a new difficulty level. So that means that at this point in the game, in normal difficulty, at around level 35 or so, you've got your 2 points. Then in Cruel, you get 2 more, and in Merciless, 2 more. So you aren't able to allocate your entire Ascendancy tree, but you're able to get a good portion of it. Many of the nodes, but you still have to choose not only what Ascendancy class to specialize in, but also what to do within that class. So the other reward that you get is Ascendancy Crafting. This allows you to put an Ascendancy mod on an item. Now in normal difficulty, you can put a mod on some gloves. So here Jonathan's adding one to his gloves, and it gives him Word of Blades. Now correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this one causes blades to appear as you kill enemies, and it's got a cooldown on it. So Jonathan's now going to show some combat, both with the Gratuitous Violence keystone that he selected with his Ascendancy Specialization, but also the Word of Blades skill. So here are the dart shooters that I referred to before in the Dry Garden, which of course is full of Devourers, and our players will understand what joy that brings. And so because he has Gratuitous Violence, it means that there's a 10% chance he causes bleeding on enemies, and they'll explode when they die. Now this is relevant with a skill like Cyclone that he's using, because Cyclone hits really, really frequently. And that means that the chance of causing bleeding happens quite a lot. And if there are a group of enemies close together, you're able to chain the explosions if you get enough enemies bleeding. Watch your health. Yep. So the dart shooters not only do quite a lot of damage, but they also slow you down, further increasing your vulnerability to traps. And that means there are some interesting hybrid trap gauntlets in the Labyrinth that combine dart shooters with other things so that you're slow when you really don't want to be because there's something horrible going on involving lava or spikes or blade sentries. Right. So one thing to note about this Gratuitous Violence specialization here is that you have the ability to purposefully set someone to a bleeding state by using a skill like Puncture. If you puncture them, then they will be guaranteed to explode when they die. So do you want to try out the Word of Blades skill? Yeah, so he has to dodge all of the dart shooters. Now he's had a lot of practice at this. I'm terrible myself, which is why he's playing and I'm just narrating. So as you see, once you get hit, the hits start to pile up as you gradually get machine guns in the corner. Yeah, so he's struggling.
Like these plates that go down?
Yeah, so there's pressure plates that you can stand on that will cause additional things to trigger. And we've tried very hard to hide stuff like that all over the place. So, you know, the problems just keep piling up as you're playing through this if you're unprepared. So once he gets through here, he'll be able to fight some monsters to demonstrate the Word of Blades skill. So the idea with the Ascendancy mods on the gloves is that you get a random one, but you don't want a random one. You want one of the ones that's good for your character build. And so it pays to do the Labyrinth repetitively to try to get the mod that you're looking for. Now on higher difficulties, there's a wider range of different mods available, and they can go on more items. Great, so he's equipping Word of Blades now and putting his gems in it. Great, so now this means that the green blades will fly between the enemies, making it a ton easier to kill groups of monsters. Now there's a small cooldown on this, so it only triggers sometimes. but it basically adds a pile more damage and makes the fights a lot easier. So there's going to be no reason why people don't want one of these Ascendancy mods on their gloves. And the ones at higher difficulties, they're not quite as visual as these ones, but they certainly have some very impactful effects that players will enjoy, increasing the damage and various other properties of specific skills.